Good evening. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Ad Hoc Committee on Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. Present for the committee this evening are Councilors Daigle, Welton, and myself as chair. Also present this evening are Councilors Peach, Gamache, O'Neill, Gould, Manning Martin, and Rosignol. Thank you for being here. We have 3 items on the agenda tonight. First item is Property Assessed Clean Energy Program, referred to as PACE. I've asked Community Development to provide an intro on this, and present here this evening for Community Development is Drew Levin, Senior Planner. Mr. Levin.
Good evening. Andrew Levin, Senior Planner for the Community Development Department. As Councilor McGinn mentioned, Robert Dolan from Mass Development is here this evening to provide the board or committee with any update or with the presentation and answer any questions that they may have.
Thank you. Mr. Dolan, we're hoping to get an overview of this program from you, if you could present that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Let me know if there's any audio issues. And I know you have a number of different issues on the agenda tonight, so I'm going to give a brief verbal overview of the program. I've briefed staff at the city of Peabody before, and so there is a presentation that I've shared with them that hopefully folks can circulate at some point. But given the agenda tonight, and I know you have other items on the agenda, I wanted to give an overview of it and then leave ample time for any questions that you folks might have. So my name is Rob Dolan. I work at Mass Development. Obviously, we are really happy to present to you folks tonight on the PACE program, Property Assessed Clean Energy. And what this program really is intended to do is provide commercial property owners in your community additional tool in their toolbox to finance energy improvements. And so whether it's energy, renewable energy or energy efficiency improvements, the PACE program is really meant to be an additional option for commercial property owners that have existing buildings that need energy improvements, say solar panels or a new roof to support solar panels or a new HVAC system. And the way this program kind of departs from a normal loan that they may get from a bank is that the way that it's repaid, the financing is repaid is a betterment assessment on the property tax bill of that property owner. And so just to take a step back, say you have a commercial property owner that is interested in installing solar panels or a new HVAC system, and they go to their typical lender, and for whatever reason, whether it's because of their loan to value ratio or their debt profile or a number of other reasons, they can't get a standard loan from their existing bank relationship. This is another option for them. And what this does is a capital provider, in essence, lenders under the program is what we call them, capital providers. They will provide funding to those property owners to carry out those energy improvements. And the way the capital provider is repaid is via an assessment, betterment assessment on that property tax bill. And so in essence, the municipality, the city or town adds a line item to that property owner's tax bill, which shows the amount that is needed on an annual basis or semi-annual basis to repay the capital provider for the funds that they provided that property owner. The PACE program does require a municipal opt-in. For that reason, we need cities and towns to opt into the program because we obviously cannot levy this responsibility on cities and towns with their opting into the program. We've had 52 cities and towns opt in so far. We've had 2 PACE deals done so far. The PACE program, Property Assessed Clean Energy, that program is done nationally. It's been done nationally for a number of years. It's about $2 billion in financings through the United States up until I think January of this past year. Connecticut has a PACE program underway. Rhode Island has a PACE program underway. New Hampshire has enacted a PACE program, but they haven't closed any deals yet. It's relatively new to Massachusetts. It was enacted in the state law in 2016, and it was up and running as of 2020. There was some technical corrections that were needed to be made at the state level. And we also had to kind of publish guidelines and other kind of underlying documentation. Massachusetts, and we've done one in Boston, Massachusetts. A property owner's perspective, some of the reasons they may want to do this is what I mentioned to you previously. They might not be able to access, a line of credit or a loan under their typical circumstances. Also, this program provides some benefits that may not exist under a typical loan. They can repay under a 20-year amortization schedule, which is typically sometimes longer than a loan repayment schedule that they may see through a regular bank. The assessment travels with the land is what we say. And so if he or she sells their property, the assessment will travel with the land to the next property owner. And the principle behind that is that the savings that the property owner is realizing will be realized throughout prospective years, 10 to 20 years in whether utility savings or energy savings or what have you. And so the assessment is really meant to stay with the property that those savings are attached to. And so that's attractive to some property owners we've talked to, because they're looking at necessary energy improvements to their property, but they don't know how long they're going to stay there. And so they're not necessarily may not see the commitment in doing these property in the investments in the property, whether it's a new roof to support solar panels, if they don't know how long they're going to be there. Whereas under the PACE program, like I mentioned, the assessment stays with the land if they ultimately sell the properties to a new owner, and that obviously has to be disclosed at the point of sale, that there is assessment attached to the property. So you see, and it's also non-accelerating debt. So if the property owner misses a PACE payment, the capital provider the only thing that's in default is the billed and uncollected amount. So it's non-accelerating debt. And so, if a property owner takes out a loan for $5 million, and they miss like one payment, the bank can't call in the full balance of the loan. So there's a number of different aspects under the PACE program that are attracted to property owners. For example, the deal that we did in Boston, it was for a large building that had 13 commercial tenants. And so the property owner saw this as a tool where they can improve their capital asset by doing a number of different energy improvements, whether it was new solar panels, new HVAC system, and they improved the value of the capital asset. And they also were able to lower bills for their tenants. And the way they recouped the money was through the triple net lease that they had with the tenants. So it was kind of a win-win for them. So the typical questions we get from municipalities are, what is our exposure, and what does this mean workload-wise for a municipality to opt into the PACE program? And regarding the former, if there is a default in the property, it is the responsibility of the capital provider to pursue any remedy or enforcement to that default. The city or town is not responsible for any default proceedings. In essence, view this as another private mortgage that you folks, you're not engaged in those kind of defaults. And so the lien is recorded by a mass development lawyer. Will do all the closing documents and record the lien, and then the lien will be transferred to the capital provider who is financing the deal, and they are responsible for any default. So there's no responsibility for the municipality in any case of the defaults. Also, property taxes take priority. Any existing betterment assessment or property tax takes priority to any PACE assessment. And so, if there's a default in the PACE assessment, typically what we see is a capital provider. Well, we haven't seen yet because there hasn't been any defaults in Massachusetts, but typically nationwide, if a property owner hasn't paid their PACE assessment, the capital provider will get involved. And in essence, that will actually help the municipality, because the capital provider fully understands that they're not going to get paid until the property taxes are paid as well. And so they're almost kind of engaging enforcement procedures well in advance of any municipal kind of tax taking or property taking. So the lien is recorded to the capital provider. The municipality is not responsible for any default proceedings. Regarding bandwidth, Mass Development fully understands that municipalities are doing a lot with limited resources, and also there's a different level of familiarity with betterment assessments with cities and towns. Some cities or towns do a number of different betterment assessments to finance, potentially infrastructure improvements. Some of them don't do any betterment assessments. So we have hired MuniCap. It's a consultant that will work with cities and towns in updating their tax software to reflect the new betterment assessment or the PACE assessment that is going to get added to the property tax bill of the relevant property owner. So we've hired a consultant that will work with you folks. And also under the statute, the assessment is required to be aligned with the frequency of the tax cycle of the respective city or town. And so, if you folks are in semi-annually or quarterly or annual assessment cycle, the property assessment has to also be on that tax bill, and it has to align with that. And also from a municipality perspective, ultimately, if you folks decide to opt in and you have a property owner that determines they want to pursue PACE and they close on a financing, your city or town, the city is not required to have the assessment updated on your tax software on day one. Typically, you see a lag between once the closing happens for that property owner and they receive the funds and when the first kind of repayment is made, up to a year or so later. So you have ample time to kind of reflect it in your tax software. For the municipal opt-in, there is language. There's a one-pager that we ask city or towns to vote on. And the city or town the vote can be either by a board of selectmen or city council in your case. It does not have to go to town meeting or any additional kind of municipal approval. So board of selectmen or city council can approve the municipal opt-in. Mass Development's role is really to educate folks on the PACE program, whether it's property owners or cities or towns like yourself, and then walk them through the process of either adopting it in the municipality or working with the property owners to kind of go through the application process and kind of understanding what kind of energy improvements they want to do. We do work with the Department of Energy Resources. They are our partners on this. And so they are really the technical experts on the energy improvements that a property owner might be trying to do. The requirement under the program is that savings from these energy improvements have to exceed the cost of the financing. And so they go through the energy improvements that a property owner is looking to do and determine what kind of savings it'll reap, and we determine whether this will actually pass the savings to investment ratio test. So ultimately, what we typically see interest from is the eligible properties are existing commercial properties. There has been a lot of interest for new commercial properties being eligible for PACE. They are not eligible under the current statute. There has been a lot of discussion about increasing that eligibility through, filing legislation or amending the existing statute. It's also available to nonprofits. Obviously, there's a
We're going to give Mr. Dolan just another minute to log back in. If that doesn't happen, we'll... Mr. Levin.
I did reach out to Mr. Dolan to see, to let him know that he needs to re-sign back in, but I can update the committee that we did meet with Mr. Dolan, as well as some of the other department heads here as well. So we can try to answer questions if the committee has any. If not, we can wait for Mr. Dolan to hopefully sign back in.
Thank you, Mr. Levin. Based on what was distributed and based on what you heard on the presentation thus far, are there any questions from the committee? Councilor Daigle.
Thank you. And I think, Drew, you're the appropriate person to answer this while we get back into the technology. If we do approve this, how does the city plan to market the program, and who, I appreciate the packet, but the short version, who qualifies to apply for it?
So I think for the marketing, I can try to help answer that question. I think we would look at properties and work with MAPC on ones that they think would be the most feasible for that. In regards to who qualifies for it exactly, I think Mr. Dolan would probably be the best to be able to further answer that question.
So you can market it citywide and then vet who does or doesn't qualify, but you can throw it out to the entire business community.
I would believe that's what we would do, is try to cast a wide net with it and then work with the appropriate parties to make sure that those that do apply or, meet it, and we can work with them.
Thank you.
Councilor Welton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Drew, I'm just curious, do we have any, to your knowledge, do we have any commercial property owners in the city of Peabody who may have business elsewhere that are already involved with the PACE program?
That I'm unsure of. I know, and I think he mentioned as well, there's 2 properties in the whole state so far that have actually done this, so pretty small pool within the state of Massachusetts. But as mentioned, Connecticut has also passed this. CPACE, I believe, is theirs. So off the top of my head, no, I do not know of any. But again, I think as this, we're kind of in the preliminary stages of it, working with mass development. So I think as this moves forwards, I think we'll get a better idea of that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Weldon. I sat in on as did Councilor Peach, sat in on a webinar on this topic a couple of weeks ago, and with respect to the marketing question, Councilor Daigle, I believe Mass Development is going to provide some services in that regard. With respect to who could take advantage of it, it's commercial and industrial buildings. It's residential buildings that are 5 units or greater. He was just at the point where he was running down through, and I'll let him pick up where he left off. He was starting to say nonprofits are eligible. I think from what I learned on the seminar, and Councilor Peach, let me know if you have a consistent memory of this, the only entities that really weren't eligible were municipalities, the municipality themselves, and residential below 5 units. And I see that we have Mr. Dolan back, so.
Yeah, sorry about that. I apologize. I don't know what happened.
So we lost you. You were just starting to run through eligibility. You said something about nonprofits, and then you froze up.
Yeah, okay. Sorry about that. So yeah, nonprofits are eligible, but there's added nuance of that they don't receive a property tax bill, obviously, but we have had nonprofits that have been interested, and they have, in previous circumstances, worked with municipalities on these type of financings, or not PACE, but getting some kind of financings and that requires some kind of betterment assessment. And so there is interest there. And then 5 residential housing for 5 residential units or more are eligible. However, you know, if you have a condo association, that also adds in the nuance that you have multiple parties that need to kind of approve on this kind of financing. And so typically we're seeing commercial property owners who use a lot of energy, whether it's a laboratory or they have, you know, the commercial property owner with multiple tenants, or they're retrofitting mills or you know, kind of industrial space of that nature, and they're looking into this kind of the program to help finance energy improvements. And we have seen some cannabis grow facilities that have been interested in this kind of financing as well. And so, like I mentioned before, we've had about 52 municipalities that have entered into it. We typically see interest in this either from a property owner reaching out to us and saying, hey, can you talk to this city or town and give them an overview because we're interested in pursuing this? Or we see city towns reaching out to us because they want to kind of add this to their portfolio of, you know, energy efficiency and sustainability programs that they are able to offer businesses in their communities. So that's kind of a high level overview of PACE, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you folks may have.
So now with Mr. Dolan back, other questions from the committee? Questions from other councilors? Council Peach.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And through you to, sorry, my brain, to the presenter, because I can't remember his name. It's been a long week.
You can call me Rob.
It's Mr. Dolan.
Mr. Dolan, thank you. Do you know of any communities who have municipal light plants that have implemented this, and how that has worked with them, just with some of the programs like solar panels and things like that? We would have to involve our municipal light plant in that. So just wondering if there's experience already there to help us.
It's an excellent question, Councilor. You've frozen him in his place. Again, piecing together what we heard from the webinar in his absence, and I don't have the why behind this, but they did make a point that this program works particularly well for municipalities that have, so you heard the same thing. I didn't get the why on that though. Why that's the case.
I missed that point, Mr. Chairman, but thank you. That's good to know. I just want to make sure that we have some sort of ground level to work with, those kind of nuances that are particular to our area.
That was the person that made that point, Councilor, was Wendy O'Malley from Mass Development, and she seemed to stress that again, that it was in fact it was on one of her slides, and I think it may be in our package, but it was definitely on one of her slides. It says where PACE is needed most, PACE is good for every community, but some it's particularly powerful. Type 1 communities with a lot of commercial buildings or multifamily housing. Type 2 communities served by municipal light plants. Questions from other councilors? Councilor Gould.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Chairman, eventually you're looking for a vote as to whether we want to participate as a municipality in this. Is it a council vote?
That's correct, Councilor. We need to opt into this. 50, I believe 50, at this moment, 52 other communities in Massachusetts have opted in. So that's what's before us tonight, is a decision as to whether or not we'll opt into this PACE program.
Looking to have a vote tonight? Is it a vote of your subcommittee?
That would be what the will, if that's the will of the committee, I certainly would be inclined to do that, but
in a simple majority?
Simple majority, correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did miss the first couple of minutes of this, and I'm quite sure that I didn't miss the answer to my question, but and I'm not sure if it's you or Mr. Levin that can answer it, but if only 50 communities out of over 300 have opted into this, and only 2 have actually taken advantage of projects, am I missing a negative here? obviously that wouldn't be something that's listed in the packet, but I feel it necessary to ask why only 50, because it sounds very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, again, I'll defer to Mr. Levin if he has an answer, but from the webinar, I took from that, and again, I'm going to rely on Councilor Peach to help me with her memory on this as well, but they were looking for projects that are a minimum of $250,000. So I think that there are, that's a pretty sizable project, and it's new. So we'd be, I think they went through an example in Greenfield, Massachusetts, where, they were really one of the first ones in the States to do it. They had all great things to say about it, but I think between the size of the projects that they're looking at and the newness of it, that has to do with the low adoption thus far. As far as negative impacts on the municipality itself, that's why I had requested that we have Ms. Antonellis and Mr. Gingras and Mr. Morphus here this evening, because I believe the only role of the municipality is to act as the collecting agent. There is no other responsibility beyond that, so I guess I would ask maybe Mr. Gingras as a spokesperson for our financial folks, if you see it that way.
Probable number of commercial properties that get involved with this, I think we can handle it without any real stresses on our administrative force.
Thank you, Mr. Gingras. Any other questions for Mr. Gingras or Councilor Daigle?
Thank you. Not for Mr. Gingras, but I'm prepared to make a loose motion to support this. But is there a precedent or a recommendation on the time frame that we want to enter into this agreement? What are other municipalities doing? Is this a one-year thing? Is it perpetuity? Is there any precedent to any of that?
My understanding is there's structure to the motion, so we can't be a loose motion, Councilor, but I'll ask Mr. Dolan, is there a path out if we found this to be administratively burdensome, or if there were some other negative impacts that were unanticipated, or is there a path out for a municipality?
Yeah, so ultimately it's a municipal opt-in, and like you mentioned, it's kind of a general language that our bond council has drafted, just kind of to highlight exactly the responsibilities of you folks. So it's a one-time municipal opt-in. There is, for each financing, there is an underlying agreement between the municipality and the property owner, just kind of outlining that you're now going to see an assessment on your property tax bill. So, in a practical matter, discussion over whether you see
ask Mass Development to get some new computers, I guess. I'm not sure we got an answer there on the opt-out, Councilor Daigle, but it sounds like there may be a path out from what he said there preliminarily. Do you happen to know, Mr. Levin? Doesn't know. We take a 1-minute recess. Okay, we're back in session. What is the will of the committee? Councilor Weldon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to approve the resolution and read the following. Whereas pursuant to Massachusetts General Law, Section C 23M, as amended, the PACE Act, the Commonwealth has established a commercial sustainable energy program known as the Massachusetts Property Assessed Clean Energy Program, PACE Massachusetts, to provide a financing mechanism, PACE financing, to private owners and commercial and industrial properties for certain qualifying commercial energy improvements. And whereas pursuant to the PACE Act, PACE Massachusetts is administered by the Massachusetts Development Finance Agency, Mass Development, in consultation with the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources. And whereas under PACE Massachusetts, the owner of the commercial or industrial property benefiting from the improvements is required to repay the PACE financing through the payment of a betterment assessment placed on such a benefited property by the municipality in which the benefited property is located. And whereas in order for an owner of commercial or industrial property to participate in the PACE Massachusetts, Section 2 of the PACE Act requires that municipality in which such property is located must elect to participate in PACE Massachusetts. And whereas the City of Peabody has determined that it is in the best interest of the municipality to participate in PACE Massachusetts as a participating municipality, as provided in the PACE Act, to permit the owners of commercial and industrial properties located in the municipality to access PACE financing for qualifying commercial energy improvements through PACE Massachusetts. Whereas now, therefore, be it resolved as follows. The City Council of the City of Peabody, with the approval of the mayor, hereby approves the municipality participating in PACE Massachusetts pursuant to the PACE Act, and authorizes the mayor to enter into a PACE Massachusetts Municipal Assessment and Assignment Agreement with Mass Development, pursuant to which the municipality will agree to: 1, levy PACE betterment assessments and impose PACE betterment assessment liens on benefited properties located in the municipality in the amounts determined by Mass Development to be sufficient to repay the PACE financing. 2, assign the PACE betterment assessment liens to Mass Development, which Mass Development may in turn assign to the providers of the PACE financing as collateral for such PACE financing. 3, include on the property tax bills for the benefited properties the installment payments necessary to repay the PACE betterment assessments in the amount and, in the amounts and at the times as determined by Mass Development. 4, collect and pay over to Mass Development or its designee the PACE betterment assessment installment payments as and when collected. And 5, enforce to the extent required by the agreement the PACE betterment assessments and liens. The agreement to be substantially in the form presented to this meeting, with such changes, modifications, and insertions as the mayor may approve as being in the best interest of the municipality. The collector or treasurer of the city or such other city agency as may be designated in the agreement is authorized to levy such PACE betterment assessments and impose the PACE betterment assessment liens on behalf of the city without further authorization by this legislative body. Notwithstanding any other provision of law to the contrary, officers and officials of the municipality, including without limitation, municipal tax assessors and tax collectors, are not personally liable to Mass Development or to any other persons for claims of whatever kind or nature under or related to PACE Massachusetts, including without limitation claims for or related to uncollected PACE betterment assessments, other than fulfillment of the obligations specified in the agreement. The municipality has no liability to the owner of the benefited property or to any capital provider related to the municipality's participation in PACE Massachusetts. Additionally, I'd like to suggest the condition that the City Council retain the right to opt out of this program if it is found to not be beneficial for the municipality or for the City of Peabody. So moved.
Councilors, you heard the motion by Councilor Welton on the motion. Hearing none, roll call.
Councilors Welton,
Yes.
Daigle,
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes,
Motion carries 3-0.
thank you. Second item on the agenda, becoming a designated green community. For Community Development, Brendan Callahan, Assistant Director. Mr. Callahan.
Hi there, Assistant Director of Planning, Brendan Callahan. I'm here to talk about the green communities. Before I dive into any questions or you have for this program, we invited Neil Duffy from the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources to give a program overview of the green communities. After his presentation, myself or Neil will try to answer any of your questions you might have. Neil?
Yeah, before we go to Mr. Duffy, Tracy Valetti is here this evening and had submitted a communication to the council that kind of acted as a catalyst to get this back before us. So I just wanted to thank Ms. Valetti for that effort, and thank you for being here this evening to help monitor our progress forward. And with that, Mr. Duffy.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks for having me. Good to be here. Thanks, Brendan. I do have a PowerPoint that I will share with you, and I'll try to be brief so we can do some questions. Hopefully you can see that all right. So just briefly, a little background. Green Communities Division, we like to try to be the energy hub for all Massachusetts municipalities, not just designated green communities. We provide technical assistance and funding for clean energy projects or feasibility studies at municipal facilities and including municipal vehicles. And just want to emphasize that we do have some programs outside of the Green Communities Designation program that that Peabody could take advantage of today. And also just want to make sure you understand that we're certainly a resource for the city, whether or not you're a designated green community. Currently, we have 280 green communities in the state. About over 87% of the population currently lives in a green community. You can see that sort of white splotch in the Northeast region that you're a part of. That also happens to be municipal light plant community. So I'll get to that in a minute, but that's part of the reason for sure. The designation grant program has been around for over a decade. We've provided over $153 million in grants, or awarded over $153 million in grants, which have provided in aggregate over $23 million in savings a year for the green communities. We've had 707 grants completed, and you can see the savings that were projected on all these projects were the equivalent of removing almost 6,000 homes from the grid, or removing over 12,000 cars from the roads. So we are authorized to spend $20 million annually in grants and loans through the program. It's funded currently mostly through the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. And our grants fund energy efficiency initiatives, some renewable energy and innovative projects. And again, in the designation and grant program, it's really projects at municipal facilities, which is important to remember. Just to give you a sense of what some of the folks around you have been able to accomplish in terms of the funding they've managed to get in grant awards. You know, the Swampscott, Salem, Beverly, and Saugus have all been green communities for quite some time. So they've managed to, you know, they managed to not only get a designation grant, but they've taken advantage of our annual competitive grants year in and year out. Lynn is a relatively new green community. That $495,000 grant was their designation grant, which they just completed last year. And so if Peabody were to be designated as a green community, the way it works is when you're designated, you receive a designation grant, and it's the same for every municipality. It's $125,000, and then there's an adder, which is based on a formula of your population and your per capita income. So Peabody's would estimate it to be about $245,000, depending on when you became designated and what those numbers were for your population and per capita income. And then, of course, once you spend those designation grant funds and close out that grant, you would then be eligible to participate in our annual competitive grant rounds. There actually now are 2 rounds per year, and those grants are capped at $200,000 per applicant. There currently is not a matching requirement for those grants, but it is competitive. So you're competing with the other green communities for those funds. So how do you become a green community? I had mentioned when we were looking at the map that a lot of those white spots on the map were municipal light plant towns and cities. And that's because in the legislation, in the Green Communities Act, it is required that municipal light plant municipalities served by municipal light plants, if they are to participate in the program or be eligible to apply, then the municipal light plant needs to add a renewable energy charge, which that charge is a contribution into the Renewable Energy Trust, which is administered by the Mass Clean Energy Center. All investor-owned utility customers pay this charge, so the logic was that that municipal light plants should do the same. One of the reasons I'm here tonight is that if a municipality served by a municipal light plant can demonstrate that they have an electric investor-owned utility customer within their municipal boundaries, even just one. So in your case, a National Grid electric customer, if they can demonstrate that, then they do not have to add that renewable energy charge, or join the Renewable Energy Trust. And from what I understand, the municipal light plant in Peabody is aware of at least one National Grid electric customer. So that's good news for Peabody, because that eliminates that added obstacle to pursuing designation. So with that aside, the 5 designation criteria in the Green Communities program are as follows. So there's the first 2 are connected with one another. One is that you must have by right zoning for renewable or alternative energy generation, or research and development, or manufacturing. So it's not all 3, it's just one of those. And my sense is, though I haven't worked with your planning office to confirm this, but a city the size of Peabody likely has zoning districts that have by right manufacturing or renewable or research and development, such that you may probably have the needed zoning in place. We would have to confirm that, of course. And then the second criteria is that you need to, the permitting process associated with these facilities needs to be what we call expedited, which means it can't take longer than a year for the permits to be approved, which, again, anything that's by right in most municipalities, there usually are mechanisms in the permitting process that would cause a delay of a year. The third criteria is really the most work involved in becoming designated. It can be anywhere from like a 3 to 6 month process. It's really a planning process. And it is that the city would need to create an energy reduction plan based on an energy use baseline. So you would need to develop a baseline energy use and establish what year that baseline is in. You're allowed to go back 2 years if you need to, but let's just say you started today. You could say 2021 is our baseline year, and that requires aggregating all your energy use, which is all your municipal buildings, electricity, gas, if there's any oil, propane, and then vehicle fuel use, gasoline, diesel. DOER has an online energy tracking tool called Mass Energy Insight, which is free to all municipalities and actually free to Peabody now. You don't need to be a green community to use it. And you can add your accounts, your utility accounts to that web tool, and would need to upload manually your municipal light plan accounts because that doesn't automatically get populated. And then from that baseline, you develop a plan to reduce that energy use by 20% in 5 years. And usually the way that process works is auditing all of your facilities and putting together a list of energy conservation measures, and certainly working with your facilities staff on anything that you've done recently or anything that's planned that you can also capture in that plan. And there is some technical assistance available for that and for all of these criteria through MAPC. We provide regional energy planning assistance grants to the regional planning agencies, and they work with cities and towns to help with the designation process. So that's something that we could certainly discuss, or other ways to support the city if you were to pursue designation, and to help the staff or volunteers in that process. And then, of course, as your regional coordinator, I would be part of the process the whole time and also assisting in that. The fourth criteria, and I should mention that the energy reduction plan needs to be adopted by the city and the schools, and it actually doesn't need to be approved by city council vote. It needs to be approved by the mayor. And on the school side, I think it may be the mayor as well, but it's either the mayor or the superintendent needs to adopt it. Usually, the school committees vote on it. The fourth criteria is adopting a fuel efficient vehicle purchase policy. And this is essentially saying that anytime the city replaces a vehicle, then it would replace it with one that meets the fuel economy standards that the Green Communities Division sets. We have different fuel economy standards for different vehicle classes. The important to know on this is that emergency vehicles are currently exempt, as are heavy duty vehicles. So it's really light duty pickup trucks, and then any other really administrative vehicles that the city owns. And just to give you a sense of the standards, like a Ford F-150 pickup truck meets our fuel economy standards currently. A Ford Explorer does for SUVs. So it's not saying that all your vehicles have to be electric, although that's hopefully the direction we're all headed in. The last criteria is technically in the statute is to minimize life cycle costs of new construction. But the only way that we're aware of anyone to be able to do that is by adopting the stretch energy code. And so this is the language that's in the statute. And then I'll just show you the map of all the stretch code communities. There's 299 stretch code communities currently. And so one interesting, one reason it's interesting to be seeking designation currently is that there are planned changes to the stretch code that are coming in the next year. So when you adopt the stretch code, you're not only adopting the current version of the stretch code, but you're actually adopting future versions. And so just to step back for a minute, the energy code is updated every 3 years. And based on that energy code, the stretch code is created. And so currently, the way the stretch code and the base code work with one another is with the base code. If you're building, first, let me just say that the stretch code only applies to new construction. But when you're working with the base code, there are two paths to comply with the code. There's a prescriptive path, which means that you're building with certain measures like a boiler of certain efficiencies or insulation of a certain R value, and you check off the list of those prescriptive measures. With the other path to compliance in the base code, if I'm building a home in Peabody right now, is the performance path, and that requires getting something called a HERS score, where a HERS home energy rater models the home prior to construction, and then once the home is built, confirms the HERS score, which is, just think of it as like miles per gallon for a home or a building. And the current standard for the stretch code is a HERS 55. And the current standard in the base code is a HERS 55. So basically, What the stretch code says now is that you have to follow that performance path. You can't follow the prescriptive path, but the HERS score is the same in the stretch code and in the base code. What is going to change next year is that the HERS score is going to go down, which is more efficient in both the base code and the stretch code. And the stretch code will be more of a stretch than the base code in that regard. The base code, I believe, will be a 52, and the stretch code will be a 45 for electric homes and a 42 for gas homes. But I want to just make sure I communicate that that is a straw proposal currently, and the code has not been completed. We just ended the public input piece of informing the public on that code. So I think I'll stop there on stretch code because it's definitely a bit of a rabbit hole to go down in terms of an explanation in a public meeting. So I think that I would also suggest, based on your questions and how you feel about the Green Communities Designation program in general, that a subsequent meeting just on the stretch code would probably be a good idea for your committee and also for the city itself. And I'll just mention that the stretch code would need to be adopted by the city council. And also, I guess the last thing on that is that you can unadopt the stretch code, though it's never happened, but it is possible that, city council, just as you adopt it, you could unadopt it if needed. And with that, I think I'll stop my screen share and open it up to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy. I believe, Mr. Callahan, you have a copy of that presentation, and you'll get that to the council.
Yes, I do have a copy.
Thank you,
and I'll
Mr.
send it.
Callahan. Motion from Councilor Welton to receive that presentation. We're going to get it as a follow-up here. Motion to receive.
So move. Motion to receive.
All in favor? Any opposed? A vote. Questions from the committee for Mr. Duffy or Mr. Callahan? Councilor Welton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to either Mr. Callahan or Mr. Duffy, are there any expenses incurred through the city to receive this designation? I mean, is this something that there's an application fee, or can you kind of explain that a little bit more if you don't mind?
Neil, do you want to answer that, or
Yeah, sure. I mean, really, it's staff time is probably the biggest resource that you'd be using in terms of the designation process. I mentioned when you're working on the energy reduction plan, you would be getting your buildings audited. Any building that is served by National Grid that has gas service from National Grid, you could use National Grid vendors to audit those buildings through the Mass Save program. So that's the typical process, and those audits are no cost to the city, and those can provide really sort of like high level audits to identify energy conservation measures. I'm not sure if Peabody Municipal Light Plant offers any programs similar to that for commercial properties. So likely there wouldn't be any cost on that end in terms of the auditing. So it's really more about just the time spent.
Thank you. One more question for Mr. Callahan. Do we have, it looks like in the first year, potentially, we could be looking at approximately $245,000 for a designated grant. Are there thoughts from your department in terms of what we might want to apply that to?
excuse me, do we have thoughts on, I didn't hear that.
All right, for the first year, it looks like if we're able to get designated, we could expect up to $245,000. I'm wondering what type of projects would we look to support with that funding?
We currently don't have really any projects in the pipeline for that. But we could look at working with the schools would probably be one of the first places I would focus on, and trying to do clean energy with the school district, as well as the municipal buildings. So I would really focus on kind of the public properties.
If I can speak to that quickly, sorry. The idea of the process is when you put together this energy reduction plan, you're identifying the projects, and then you really have a menu of projects to choose from, and you can prioritize from that menu so that you're ready to go for your designation grant, and then hopefully subsequently ready to go for other projects. And usually their projects often can be projects that you need or want to do anyways. It's like HVAC equipment, building envelope improvements, building controls, EV charging stations. We subsidize purchases of those, battery electric vehicles. So anything that saves energy at municipal facilities is, for the most part, eligible. I think lighting is we're starting to support less. But other than that, just think of it as in terms of like the to-do list in your facilities. There are probably a lot of items there that you could pick from.
Great, thank you. Just a brief follow-up question for you, Mr. Duffy, on that. Would those expenses be allowable for new construction, or is that earmarked more towards retrofitting current buildings?
Yeah, it's earmarked more towards existing buildings.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Weldon. Councilor Daigle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank Tracy Valetti, who's in the audience and has kind of spearheaded this. She's been fighting for this for a long time through different channels and had a lot of luck going through Councilor Manning to get this to the City Council. So I appreciate her time. Thank you, Tracy, as well as Stuart Lazares, who's tuning in from home and watching and following and keeping us all in check. And we'll follow up with many questions, I'm sure. My one question through the chair, I guess to Mr. Callahan, if I'm understanding this, so any time that is spent through Mr. Duffy, the city's on the hook for paying him for? Is that correct?
He would provide, from what I understand, Mr. Duffy would provide the city technical assistance on this. But as for developing the energy plan, that would be on the onus of the city. We would be leading that, but Mr. Duffy would provide us technical assistance.
Thank you. So do we have to pay him for that?
I don't believe so, no.
No, I think that.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy. We appreciate that. All right,
So
those are the only questions I have. Thank you all.
Yeah, I'll just clarify that the technical assistance we provide, the more robust technical assistance we provide is through MAPC and the other regional planning agencies. So we provide MAPC with a grant to provide technical assistance to municipalities. And in that way, that's much more hands-on, although it's very much guidance, and there still is a needed commitment from municipal staff. But on top of that, I am always a resource to provide technical assistance as well.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy. We also have with us this evening Brian Howcroft, Assistant Manager of Peabody Municipal Light Plant. So if anybody has any questions for Mr. Howcroft, or if Mr. Howcroft would like to make any comments relative to this topic, you're welcome to do so. Thank you, Mr. Howcroft. Any questions from other councilors? Councilor Gamache.
Yes, it's been mentioned that there's going to be a creation of an energy reduction plan. Through the chair to Mr. Callahan, who's going to do that? Is it going to be facilities? Is it going to be community development, PMLP? Have we even thought about who's going to do this? I know there's plenty of companies out there that will do it at a fee. And I know that this is not an easy go. We tried to do that in facilities when I was there, specifically. The largest consumer we have for energy in the city is the school department, is all our schools, and they are not energy efficient. So we could save the 20% in one building very easily. You do an audit, and that audit will be glowing after the first day. So have we decided upon, is it going to be Mr. Hafey from facilities? Is it going to be an outside vendor? Is it going to be, have we even thought about that?
It hasn't been discussed, or it hasn't been discussed with me, but you identified the typical departments will probably have to take this on, which would it be facilities, community development? I think it would be a partnership of all the departments, obviously. But at this time, we have not identified which department would lead the audit.
I mean, through you to Mr. Duffy, if I may, I was in facilities for a couple of years ago, and there was companies that would come in and would do an audit at a fee, providing that they could come in and they could establish a red line, and then they would come in and they would do what had to be done, and they showed that there would be a reduction of energy, there would be an increase in energy savings. Do you deal with those types of companies, or is it solely upon the municipal to create its own and then move forward with you people?
Yeah, so the typical way that the energy reduction plan gets developed is, as I was mentioning, so the investor-owned utilities have what they call, well, National Grid calls them project expediters, and they're approved vendors, which are some of these companies you're probably referring to. And through the Mass Save program, they provide to commercial customers no-cost audits using these project expediters. So typically what happens, and because Peabody, I'm assuming, has a number of buildings that are served by National Grid gas, you can take advantage of that. So typically what happens is a municipality will work with one of these vendors, and the vendors will do these audits, which are really like a sort of a high level, the low-hanging fruit type of audit to identify the energy conservation measures in all the buildings. And that is what is really sort of the basis of the energy reduction plan. There are cases where municipalities will go out on their own to hire similar companies or the same companies and pay for it, but that's usually the way it works. The other reason that, I shouldn't say reason, part of the way that the Green Communities program seems to work is another piece of the Green Communities Act is there's procurement law, which allows investor-owned utility vendors to be hired by public entities like a city for energy conservation measures without that city going out to bid for any projects that are under $100,000. So typically what happens is a vendor that is involved in the energy reduction plan may be hired for the projects that they're identifying, as long as they're not major projects that are over $100,000. And for the municipality, the advantage is you don't have to go out to bid and you can expedite that process. That is not required. And certainly there are many varieties of how cities and towns do it, but that's kind of what I would say is a typical process.
Yes, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Gamache.
One follow-up to that. So you're talking National Grid. Well, we have National Grid that services our schools, most of our schools. We could utilize them for the schools that they actually service, but we can't utilize them for a municipal building that does not have National Grid as a free consultant.
Yeah, do you have any municipal buildings that have oil?
Yeah.
That are heated with oil? So that would be a conversation. It depends. I don't know your building stock. Sometimes the vendors are willing to take a look at those buildings too, since they're already in the municipality, but it really depends on the extent of how many of those buildings there are. So there may be a need to pay for some audits of some of those buildings, but not pay for audits of all of your buildings in that case.
So if I get this right, you are saying as long as it's National Grid utilizing their services for one of our facilities, they will do a free audit in that facility?
Yeah,
because we
and it's not
utilize National Grid.
It's not National Grid, it's one of their vendors who are doing it.
Okay.
But yeah, that's essentially the idea. And then I guess the other piece of information I'm not aware of is I don't know if your municipal light plant offers any commercial audit program currently similar to that. So if there is something like that, maybe you could take advantage of that. But that would be, I think, the next conversation, you know, a subsequent conversation to have on what it would take to put together the plan.
Well, yeah, you know, looking over at Mr. Howcroft, they don't give the audits. The PMLP doesn't do the audits. So we would have to fall upon what I believe is the biggest consumer of energy for the city is the schools, specifically the high school. The Higgins is basically a green building because of the new equipment. So I would suggest if we do move forward with this, that whoever decides to do it, look at our school department and those buildings that are utilizing National Grid. And I think the only one that wasn't was Welch, to be honest with you. So that's where I would start, especially the high school. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gamache. Councilor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Mr. Duffy. Mr. Duffy, my concern lies primarily in number 5 with the stretch energy code. I see that it's an option, but what are our other options? I mean, I know that I think that you'd ultimately like us to adopt the stretch code, but first, we don't have a copy of it, and we haven't. I don't believe the council has received a copy of the stretch code, but I also don't know how that would affect the cost of residential permits. I don't know if our building inspectors or building commissioner are familiar with the stretch code because we haven't adopted it yet, and what that would entail to get them familiarized. So I think we're a little ways off on that, but what are the other options there?
So I would agree with you that you are a ways off. I mean, this is the first conversation, and the stretch code takes multiple conversations and meetings to talk about and explain, and for all of those reasons that you identified. It's a little confusing because in the statute, the language is that in that 5th criteria, you must reduce the life cycle costs of new construction. And it's actually under 3,000 square feet. That's what the language says, but there is actually no other way to do it that any of us are aware of or that any other municipality has done other than adopting the stretch code. So there really isn't another option that I'm aware of, but it's important to just, for full disclosure, explain what the language in the statute is. So really adopting the stretch code is your only option to meeting that criteria. If the city were to come up with a different idea, then we'd be open to hear it, but we haven't heard one in the 280 communities that have become green communities. The education piece would require meetings and discussion. I will reiterate that it is for the stretch energy code is really only applicable. The only difference really for the most part is a new construction. So it wouldn't impact anyone who's doing major renovations or additions to their home. But municipalities aren't allowed to develop their own energy code. So really right now, your only choices are base code and stretch code. And you haven't adopted the stretch code. You're a base code community.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Duffy, can you forward us a copy of that stretch code, or is that under 40A?
I can I can certainly send you what it is. It may not be helpful because the stretch code right now, all it is it's one page. It's an appendix to the base code. And what I was trying to explain rather quickly, but right now with the base code, there are two paths to comply with the base code as a builder. There's a prescriptive path and a performance path. And essentially what the stretch code says, I mean, it's a little bit more complicated than this, but not much. Essentially what the stretch code says is you can only follow this one performance path that is within the base code. So it's really just this one page appendix that refers you to different sections in the base code. So if you read the stretch code document, it wouldn't make sense if you didn't have the full code book and sort of go to each of those sections, but that's essentially what it says. And I'm happy to share it with Mr. Callahan. I think part of what I was trying to say is that will change next year, and I don't have that document now because the stretch code it hasn't changed yet. So that's something that I think requires a more substantive meeting that's really stretch code based.
Thank you. My last question, just in that same subject. So the stretch code came out, what, 2015, 16, somewhere in that area? Was it?
I think 2009 was the first version of the stretch code.
Okay, so then it was changed. It's been changed twice since it's been implemented. So
yeah, codes are updated every 3 years. So I think the current version is 2018. It's confusing, but the current version is the 2018 version of the stretch code, I think.
Yeah, so I'm glad to hear you say that it's confusing because that's just basically my concern is obviously we want to be a green community. Obviously we support energy efficiency. I just don't like the unknowns of the stretch code where it's a requirement of this and you don't know, it's continually changing, as it should, but the stretch code broadly changes. I think a little bit more broad than some are aware of. And the requirements become more and more stringent. And I just don't know what the long-term cost to construction in the city is. Now, I mean, we could debate that, whether the financial cost and the energy efficiency, whether the worth is there. But I would say that it's worth it, but to the detriment of the developer, to homeowners, ultimately homeowners. I think you said right now it doesn't affect homeowners in renovations, but will it eventually? It's just a question that I have about the long-term effect.
Yeah, I think all valid concerns. A couple of things I'll point out is that the base code actually changes every 3 years, and the stretch code doesn't change more frequently than the base code. It actually changes based on the new version of the base code. And the stretch code actually hasn't really changed significantly for a number of years. And it isn't that different. The first version of the stretch code was essentially a different code. And to your point, it was pretty confusing in those early years with the 2009 version because building inspectors basically had like two codes that they had to use. So that or understand. And so that's changed. Now it's, as I said, it's really just a one-page appendix to the base code. It will be similar going forward, only that the stretch code will be stretching further and be requiring more. So I think that it's just important to understand that as a base code community, your code changes as often as the stretch code does. It doesn't change more frequently or necessarily more drastically from every 3-year period. But I agree with all your other questions and concerns, and I think that it would be really important and helpful to have a stretch code, a meeting based on the stretch code, where I could be here to talk more about it in depth, as well as bring probably folks from our efficiency division and consultants we work with who have background in the construction industry.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Duffy. That may be something that we want to refer to Mr. Tallarico and his department, and through Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. Callahan, I think wants to answer my question, if you don't mind.
I don't want to really answer the question entirely, but I did talk to the building commissioner, and before he came to Peabody, he was from a stretch code community, so he's somewhat aware of it, but that's really all I can offer for, with response to the building commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Turco. Questions from other councilors? Seeing none, what's the will of the committee? Just from my perspective, this, we've been kind of in limbo with respect to this program. It's been brought up years ago, and it was kind of on again, off again attempts to advance it. I think we're at a point where we need to decide, are we going to do this or not? So I think perhaps if the will of the committee is that we want to pursue this as a municipality, then the motion would be along the lines of move that the city actively pursue green community designation, and the Community Development Department engage MAPC for technical assistance to accelerate that activity. Councilor Rosendahl, you're not on the committee, but I'm certainly willing to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To be honest with you, as Councilor Turco said earlier, I think we all want to go green, but with the amount of questions that we have, me personally, when this comes to the committee as a whole, I don't think I can support it because we don't know who's going to be monitoring it. We don't know whether the building inspector is current with all of the codes. We really don't have a lot of the answers. I think that this is a good project. I think it's valid, but until we have even what the stretch codes even look like, my opinion, and again, I'm not on this committee, I just think keeping it in committee until we have all of the answers that were raised, I think is just a prudent way to move forward. That's just my thought.
Thank you, Councilor Rosendahl. I just think I don't necessarily disagree with your position. I just think this is more of a journey than it is we're not agreeing to anything by the motion that I suggested. We're looking to pursue the green communities designation. I don't think we're committed to any of the program parameters by doing so. Right now, we're not pursuing it. We're just, so we need to take some proactive measure to get the city to actually pursue it. So that's kind of where I see that this is kind of the place we've been. This is the limbo.
Through you to you, Mr. Chairman. So just for my clarification, so you're not looking to go into this venture, you're looking at pursuing it forward further and getting more information, correct?
That is correct, yeah. And I think just to clarify on that, Mr. Duffy, is how I've categorized that make sense to you in terms of this journey that we would embark on versus we would not be doing anything definitive this evening in terms of specifically agreeing to any of the program parameters.
Yeah, I agree with that, and that is typically part of the process. Is there's at least some sort of formal commitment to explore designation, and that's really what can kick off a more concerted effort to answer some of these questions. So I think that's appropriate in my view, and what I've seen other municipalities do.
Thank you for that clarification. Councilor Manning Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't going to comment on this because I really thought it was going to, at this stage of the game, was really going to fly through. Back in 2008, when this was first proposed by the state, City of Peabody, this city council, was one of the first in the state to act to become a green community. And we learned shortly thereafter that we could not be a green community because we had a municipal light plant. Then the state tweaked, I'd say in 2011, they tweaked the law in order to allow cities that did have municipal light plants to enter into the program. And at that time, I think it was something like $3 per ratepayer it would have cost us to engage in that newly tweaked program. The city would have to enter into a trust with the Peabody Municipal Light Plant. But at that time, the commissioners of the light plant did not want to engage and become a green community and charge their ratepayers that $3. So we were shut out yet again. And we could have been, back in 2008 or even in 2011, one of the first communities to become a green community and take part in the millions and millions and millions of dollars that were out there at that time that we could have benefited from, but we didn't. So for me tonight to hear after 14 years, we're asking these same questions, we haven't moved forward, we haven't sought out the answers to these questions, we haven't had the state kind of pounding on our door and all these years trying to get us to become a green community, become more energy efficient, and we're stalling again yet tonight, and it's been 14 years. You're again leaving millions of dollars on the table, and it's an opportunity tonight to become part of what most every other community in the Commonwealth has engaged in and benefited from and has improved their communities and their environment by doing so. I'm just really surprised that we're, I appreciate your questions, but it's been a long time coming, and other communities are able to make it work and have made it work, and the taxpayers have really benefited from it. So again, I'm just surprised it hasn't passed through at least subcommittee to move forward so that we can reach out and get to a point where we can improve our energy efficiency and to discuss that our schools need to have energy efficient programs and audits in place. They should have them. When I was on the school committee, we were implementing them and planning them. So I just don't understand all this kind of looking backward at things that we already have answers to or should have answers to or should have been doing all along. So I am a little discouraged that there seems to be, again, more speed bumps in the way to really just move this forward and get to where we should have been some time ago. So those are my comments. I will be supporting this if it does make it to full committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Manning-Martin. Councilor O'Neill.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, I'm not a member of the committee, but I appreciate letting me the opportunity to briefly speak. I would just say from my perspective, I was not a member of the council in the past. I'm fully supportive of Peabody becoming a green community. However, I do like to have the full, I guess, menu of responsibilities that we would have to do. If I was to vote, if this passes the committee, I certainly would just want to know, can the city commit to, the energy use baseline, reducing it by 20%? Are we going to agree to buy only fuel-efficient vehicles? If we buy a fire truck, are those actually made to be fuel-efficient? Basic things like that. I'm fully supportive of entering in this, but I just feel like to try to just say, let's do it without having questions. I understand this may have been bounced around in the past. I can't answer that. I wasn't a member of the council, but certainly I think we should try to move forward, but there's other things that we should have lined up before we agree to go and do this. But that's just my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor O'Neill. Other councilors, just again to reiterate, nothing in the motion that I had suggested commits us to anything. It just would initiate a process to explore all these things and get these questions answered. Otherwise, we're going, I fear that we're going to find ourselves here at some future point in time wondering why we never got started. And, you know, I'm just trying to get that process going. Councilor Welton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm prepared to make that motion, but did want to just clarify with you where we would be sending this. Would you like this to be sent out of committee to the committee of the whole, or remain here within the committee?
I think it would make sense for us to evaluate progress as we go forward as an activity of the committee. But what the nature of the motion would be to get community development to engage MAPC for the technical assistance to pursue it, so that we can get some of the questions answered and that we can get the comprehensive information that we're looking for, and everybody gets can gain a comfort level or perhaps not with the various parameters of the program. So I guess the short answer to your question is, short term, I want to send it to community development to engage with MAPC to get the process moving. Longer term, as the process progresses, I'd like to monitor that progress in committee.
I'm prepared to make that motion if you'd like. I'd like to move that we pursue a green community designation and formally explore that designation for the city of Peabody, and refer this to community development to formally engage with MAPC for consultation and to have them report back to this committee. So moved.
Councilors, you heard the motion from Councilor Welton on the motion. Seeing none, roll call.
Councilors Welton,
Yes.
Daigle,
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Motion carries 3-0.
Okay, next item on the agenda, Net Zero Climate Action Planning Process. Mr. Levin.
Good evening again. I believe Brooks Winter will be joining us as well from the MAPC, but just to begin, I'm going to try to keep this very brief for everybody. The Net Zero Playbook is an extremely exciting project that the city has been working on, along with Peabody Municipal Light Plant and the MAPC. This is an incredible project that we're working on, and this plan is going to help lay out a roadmap and action items and a strategy on how the city can help reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. We had a really great public forum at the end of last year, where we had some really great discussion and we heard some really great feedback. And now we've been working with Brooks Winter at the MAPC, and he's here tonight, and I've asked Brooks to give a brief presentation for everybody here this evening. Brooks did pass me along his presentation slideshow. I have since sent that to Allison to forward to the board, or sorry, to the committee, if they would like to see that afterwards. Sorry, I should clarify. I just received this presentation during this meeting and have since sent it over now.
Great, thanks, Drew.
Mr. Winter.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks, councilors. I'll be brief because I know we're running a little behind schedule. But just want to say first, regarding the last two agenda items, very exciting that the city is considering PACE and Green Communities designation. I know we'll be looking forward to hearing from you about how MAPC could support, especially on Green Communities designation. And I think both of those things are actions that we have been considering for the city's net zero climate action plan. So would be great to have progress on those started. I'm going to quickly share my screen with you all. I have a brief presentation. I'll skip around through the slides to to make it go a little faster. But as Drew mentioned, my name is Brooks Winter. I'm a senior clean energy specialist at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council and a member of the clean energy team at MAPC. Just gonna pull these up here 1 second.
While you're doing that, Mr. Winter, Councilor Diego, can I have a motion to receive?
So moved.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? To vote. Mr. Winter.
Great, thank you, Chairman McGinn. So we are working with Drew and Kurt and company in the Community Development Department on a project to develop a net zero roadmap, a climate action plan for the city of Peabody. And I'll skip this. You all are familiar with MAPC. But a little background, we got a grant from the Massachusetts Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs last year to conduct a project with 4 MLP communities, including Peabody. The products of which will be the net zero planning process that we are undertaking right now, and a net zero roadmap, a climate action plan for the city of Peabody that will lay out the steps that the city can take in the short and medium term to start making progress to align with the Commonwealth's goal of being net zero emissions by 2050. So MAPC is leading community engagement and the roadmap development process with support from Drew and Kurt and Brian Howcroft and John Mayhos and other folks from PMLP. We kicked it off, as Drew mentioned, with a really successful workshop in December of 2021, and we'll be going now through fall of this year. So a little update on the progress to date. As I mentioned, we did the workshop in December. Since then, we've been doing some direct outreach and having meetings with community organizations, including the ones on the screen here, the Rotary, Green Peabody, volunteers from Newhall Fields Community Farm. We also developed a community input survey, which I'll share a link to this evening, and would appreciate all of your help spreading the word and sharing your ideas about what should be included in Peabody's net zero roadmap. We are also currently working on the initial strategy list of actions and strategies, what the sort of substance of that net zero roadmap will be. And we also have sort of roughly quarterly meetings with the 3 other MLP communities, representatives both from the municipality and the MLP to share the approaches that they're taking to their respective net zero planning projects that are sort of going on in parallel. So I'll skip through this. This is just a little context. Basically, net zero means that you are not that you're emitting as little carbon pollution as possible and greenhouse gas emissions, and whatever's left over, you are helping to remove from the atmosphere. And I mentioned the sort of the statewide goals that are to reach net zero emissions by 2050 and 50% reduction by 2030. Municipal light plants, interestingly, are now also required to purchase 50% of their power from non-carbon emitting sources by 2030 and to reach net zero emissions by 2050. So PMLP will be a really important partner in this work, and they have a really important role to play. And there, as Neil mentioned, there are new stretch code provisions and lots of other work happening in the wake of the roadmap, 2050 roadmap law that was passed last year. And just wanted to mention, it's a question that's come up a couple times, what are other communities in the region and in Massachusetts doing? You all are in good company. About a quarter of municipalities in the MAPC region have or are developing climate action plans. This number is actually probably higher than that. It's probably approaching 30 or so communities, so about a third at this point. Many have also adopted their own goals to reduce greenhouse gas emissions community-wide, and we'll be developing this plan. But if the council sees fit to adopt a formal goal, I think that can also be a really helpful thing for municipalities to do, as to sort of set that benchmark and that intention. And then about 2/3 of communities in the region have some kind of volunteer committee dedicated to climate sustainability or energy issues. And I know that that's sort of a great area in Peabody. There's the Green Peabody group. There's this committee that's sort of ad hoc. But I think one of the things we've been considering is what kind of lasting infrastructure can the city set up to make sure that these issues are being dealt with on an ongoing basis. So that's something for us to consider through the project. I'll skip over this. This is the results of the greenhouse gas inventory that we've done through the project. But basically, won't be a surprise to hear that commercial and industrial buildings are a big source of your emissions in Peabody, as a sort of an industrial city with many large businesses. That's where a lot of energy is being used and emissions are being produced. Passenger vehicles are also a big source, and then residential buildings as well. So the results of that are in this presentation. So here's our timeline. We've been working to gather community input, as I mentioned, this spring, and we're developing that initial list of actions. We're going to be working to gather feedback once that list is ready to go, with a second community workshop coming up in the next couple of months, I anticipate. Then we will be sort of sharing a first draft of the roadmap with the city to gather input and feedback from stakeholders over the summer, and then we're hoping to finalize the roadmap in the fall of this year. So I mentioned that survey. You can take that at mapc.ma/Peabody. So would appreciate folks' input on that and help spreading the word to take that survey. Again, the URL for that is mapc.ma/Peabody. And yeah, happy to take questions at this point. Thanks for your time, and I hope that was brief enough for you all.
Thank you, Mr. Winter. Appreciate you accelerating that. Questions from the committee? Any initial questions from other councilors? I think the appropriate action here is to keep this in committee for some additional monitoring, given the timeline. Does that make sense to the committee? I see you nodding to the affirmative. So I'll report this out as a report of progress, as an update on this initiative, and we will ask Mr. Winter to rejoin us as we get a little bit deeper into the process for an additional update, and perhaps we can get into a little more depth. Is that agreeable with you, Mr. Winter?
That sounds great. I would love that.
Mr. Levin? Okay. Okay, with that, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Councilors, you heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? We're adjourned.
Good evening, councilors. This meeting is going to come to order. The City Council will convene on Thursday, April 12th, to hold its regularly scheduled meeting at 7:30 p.m. for the purpose of discussing any all business via in-person and remote participation in accordance with Chapter 40A of the Massachusetts General Laws, Sections 20A, B, and C of the Acts of 2021, signed into law by Governor Baker on June 16th, 2021. Alternative public access to this meeting shall be provided in the following manner. 1, this meeting is being televised by Peabody Access Television on cable channel 9. 2, real-time public comment during public hearings can be addressed to the Peabody City Council using Zoom virtual meeting software for remote access. Users may view the meeting and make a comment or question to the chair via the audio option. Please visit www.peabody-ma.gov for Zoom information. This meeting is being taped by the Peabody Access Television and also being recorded by the City Council stenographer. Let's all rise for the moment of silence. And the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Heard the motion from Councilor Gould for approval of the record. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. I'm going to go out of order, and I would entertain a motion under suspension of the rules to receive item 8L, letter from a memo from Alice, the clerk, Allison Danforth, regarding the appointment of Karina Tirado to the position of assistant clerk of committees.
So moved.
Thank you. You heard the motion from Councilor Rossignol. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. As you see, we have a new face up here with us, Karina. Do you want to introduce Karina, Allison?
Good evening, councilors. After an exhaustive search in 2 long years, Karina has come to help me out with all the council work, so I'm very much looking forward to working with her. She's a great fit for my office. Everybody's thrilled to have her, and we appreciate your affirmative vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Clerk Danforth. Do we have a motion to make on the letter from Clerk Danforth?
Mr. President, move to approve the recommendation by Clerk Danforth. So moved.
Thank you, Councilor Gould. We'll do a roll call vote.
Councilors Gould.
Yes.
Rossignol.
Yes.
Manning Martin.
Yes?
Peach.
Yes.
Welton. O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Daigle. Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 11-0.
Very good. Thank you. Welcome aboard. Okay, we'll get started with item 4A. It's a special permit. Because this special permit applicant, if approved, will have to submit an application to the Alcoholic Beverages Control Commission. I will have to recuse myself as I don't want to have the appearance of a conflict between my position as a city councilor and my position at the Alcohol Beverage Control Commission, so I'll be recusing myself. And Councilor Manny Martin, could you take the chair?
Thank you, City Council President Melville. I want to commend the City Council President for honoring the City Council's longstanding tradition to defer to and respect the status of President Pro Tem, and I, in turn, am honored to hold that title. With that, item 4A, special permit for Nick Morano, 637 Lowell Street. Would the clerk please read the notice?
Notice is hereby given that the City Council of the City of Peabody, acting as the special permit granting authority, will conduct a public hearing on Thursday evening, April 14th, 2022, at 7:30 p.m. in the Frank L. Wigan Auditorium, 24 Lowell Street, Peabody, Mass., and remotely via Zoom on the application from Nick Morano, 40 Pillings Pond Road, Linfield, Mass., for a special permit requesting to amend Special Permit 51-1995 to allow for a restaurant with alcoholic beverages with some food to be consumed on the premises and some food for takeout, and to amend Condition Number 2 Hours of operation to operate Monday through Saturday until 10 p.m. at 637 Lowell Street, Peabody, Mass., as filed in accordance with Sections 4.2.5, 6.1, and 15.7 of the Peabody zoning ordinance. For remote participation using the Zoom platform, please visit www.peabody-ma.gov under City Calendar on the homepage or contact the City Clerk's office. Peabody City Council, Councilor Ryan Melville, City Council President.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Would the petitioner please state your name and address into the record and tell us what you'd like to do?
So my name is Yadi Morano. I am the wife. So again, my husband was here. He had to leave. We live at 40 Pillings Pond Road, and all we're looking to do is amend the special permit so we can continue to offer food as well as potentially offer beer and wine at some point. With the homemade pasta that we make, we feel like someone might want to have a glass of wine. That's it. We bought Lupo's, which you guys probably are more aware of. We bought Lupo's probably, actually was a year ago, May 5th. So we've been operating, we were operating under Lupo's all last summer, and we switched over to Morano's in September. So it's been great. We love it. The community, West Peabody, has been phenomenal to us. So we're just, again, continuing being a family restaurant, and we just wanted to offer beer and wine. And that's it.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone in the audience to speak in favor of this petitioner? Anyone in the audience to speak in favor? Would you please, sir, state your name and address into the record? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Councilors. Jared Hockman, 52 Ellsworth Road. Firstly, I'd like to apologize for my appearance before you tonight, my attire. I was coming from a charity that I work on, and I didn't have much time to go home and change before you, so it's no disrespect intended to the council. I know the Moranos for over 25 years. They're quality people. Nick Morano and I met coaching Little League Baseball in Revere, of all places. I want to say back in 1996 or so, and I was fortunate enough to meet his wife Yadi shortly after that when they started dating and eventually became married. This is a quality family. These are people who give back to the community. Nick and I were coaching baseball before either one of us were married or had children. Morano's Trattoria, I expect, will quickly become a big benefit to the city of Peabody. They'll continue to provide to the community. They're asking for something that I think is very reasonable. There are other establishments within that shopping center that already offer alcohol and things like that, and there are certainly plenty of establishments that this council has been gracious enough to afford that opportunity to, particularly during COVID-19 pandemic, and give them an opportunity to grow and thrive and survive. And like I said, I expect that once that all happens, they'll give back to the community tenfold. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Attorney Hockman. Is there anyone else in the audience to speak in favor of this petitioner? Last call in favor. Anyone on Zoom that would like to speak in favor? If so, could you please raise your hand on the Zoom? Being none, is there anyone in the audience to speak in opposition to the petitioner? Anyone in opposition? Last call, is there anyone in the audience to speak in opposition? Being none, turn it over to the ward councilor, Councilor Gamache. Oh.
Madam Chair, it's Ward 6, so it's, I'll take it if you wouldn't mind.
I did that permit 1995, by the way, if you check the record.
I'm sure that's what I was thinking of. Thank you, Councilor Gamache. To the ward councilor, it's all yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I met with the applicants, both Nick and Yadi Morano, at their restaurant, and went through the application and, you know, their goals of what they're trying to do. And Ms. Morano mentioned it perfectly. You know, small business restaurant with, you know, 6 or 7 tables. They've taken it over. They've been there coming up on a year. And they're looking to two aspects, you know, to extend the hours, because as of right now, the majority of their evenings, they have it, the current permit allows for closing at 9. That does not give a lot of time for them to do cleanup and close down properly. So they're looking to extend another hour in the evenings, and also to have beer and wine sales. We did discuss briefly, like, it's their intent, as Mrs. Morano said, you know, if someone wants to have you know, a wine with pasta or beer with a meal, that's what it's, you know, they're intending to do. They're not looking to make this anything other than a family restaurant with beer and wine. This is their dream. They're not looking to make it a watering hole, if you will, up in that. And as school committee member Hockman mentioned, there's a restaurant that adjoins right next to them that currently offers alcohol sales. So I'm in favor of this request. A couple small comments just in general, that in your packages that you received regarding the application, the city collector had put in there that there was some overdue funds, a fairly small amount, but the day we met, the applicants went down and took care of it, so that's been confirmed. There are nothing else owed. And then the second item is, I just want to tell council, so certainly this is a beer and wine request for use. So Section 17, the rules typically require an applicant to have all permits or approvals done by various boards. As this is you know, if in fact this use is approved for beer and wine or alcohol, if you will, by the council tonight, they will have to go before the licensing board, the Peabody licensing board, which will then, if in favor, they vote in favor, they can go to the state. So rather than having them complete a whole lot of expensive filing and applications, it was my thought that they would come for the use, because without the approval of a use, they can't have a license to sell beer and wine. So I just wanted to put that out and make sure that I clarified to any councils. So I have no other comments at this time, and will certainly open up to councils for their comments or questions. Thank you.
Any comments from the council? Councilor Daigle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sure it's in the packet. Is this so it's a beer and wine license? Are you getting it from a quota, or are you buying it from someone?
We would, once, if we got the approval, then our next step is to meet, I guess, with wholesalers. We're still in such the beginning. We wouldn't buy, I don't know if I understand the question.
Do you, so the way the liquor licensing system works, you can buy one from an existing license, or there might be some available for businesses.
We're applying for a whole new license for
That's
beer.
just available from the city.
That's available from the.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
You all said, Councilor Daigle. Any other councilors? Being none, Councilor O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd move to close the public hearing.
Heard the motion. Roll call on the motion.
Councilors Gould.
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Nanny Martin.
Yes.
Peach.
Yes.
Welton.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Daigle.
Yes.
Motion carries 10-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Councilor O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At this time, I'd move to approve the application from Nick Morano, 40 Pillings Pond Road, Linfield, Mass., for a special permit requesting to amend Special Permit 51-1995 to allow for a restaurant with alcoholic beverages, with some food to be consumed on the premises and some food for takeout, and to amend condition number 2, hours of operations to operate Monday through Saturday until 10 p.m. at 637 Lowell Street, Peabody, Mass. Is filed in accordance with Section 4.2.5, 6.1 and 15.7 of the Peabody zoning ordinance. I would also make that motion with the following conditions. Number 1, no deliveries prior to 7 a.m. Number 2, the hours will be Monday through Saturday, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. Sunday, 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. And condition number 3, only beer and wine will be sold to Eden dining customers only. So moved.
You heard the motion. Councilor O'Neill?
Sorry, Madam Chair, I just wanted to make sure the applicant knew we're going to take the votes.
You're not going anywhere, right? You're not going anywhere, yeah. And Councilor Gamache, were you motioning?
I just wanted to make sure that the hours for Sunday was included in the motion, and it was. Thank you.
Very good. You heard the motion. Roll call on the motion.
Councilors Gould.
Yes.
Rossignol.
Yes.
Peach. Yes. Welton.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Daigle.
Yes.
Manning Martin.
Yes.
Motion carries 10-0.
Congratulations. All right. I'm going to make have a 2-minute recess so we can get City Council President back.
All right. All right, councilors, we're going to get back. All right, we're going to move on to item 4B. We do have a late communication, and Councilor Welton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to receive item late 12. So moved.
All right, you heard the motion from Council. Council, you want to do that as a receive and approve the continuance?
Receive and approve. And just to give you a background, there's a request for a continuance for the special permit hearing for CV 13 Corwin LLC. So moved.
You heard the motion from Councilor Welton. All in favor? Any opposed? To vote. Thank you, Councilor Welton. Moving on to item 4C. We did get a late communication on that as well. Councilor Peach.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move to receive and approve late communication 10. It's a communication from Attorney McDonald's asking to continue due to a medical issue that they could not be present tonight. So moved.
You heard the motion from Councilor Peach to receive and approve the continuance for item 4C. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. And then, Councilor Welton, do you want to receive all the late communications for that special permit now, just so we can?
Yeah,
make sure
I'd be happy to. I was
All right.
going to try to clarify that with you, so thank you. So move to receive the following late communications in opposition to the special permit hearing for CV Corwin LLC. Late communication 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, 19, and 20. So moved.
You heard the motion from Council Welton. All in favor? Any opposed? The vote. All right, we're going to move on to reports of committee. I'm going to start with there was not on the agenda, but the clerk and the chairman of that committee, Councilor Rossignol, had informed me that there was a subcommittee meeting for the city council and the school committee, and we'll get the report of that committee now.
Thank you, Mr. President. The joint school committee and city council met last week. In attendance was school committee member John Swanton, Beverly Ann Griffin Dunn, Brandy Carpenter, Superintendent Josh Vidala, myself, Craig Welton, and Councilor Turco. Meeting started at 6:30. The topics were the busing plan for the Welch School. As you know, Mr. President, the Welch School is going under renovations, and the plan is for 2 grades to be moved out of that building moving forward. So the topic of discussion was where the children were going, how they were going to get there, what that was going to cost. And Superintendent Vidala gave us a brief summary regarding that most of the students are going to end up going to the South Memorial. Some will be going to the Carroll, the Brown, and the Center. The way that they chose where the students were going to go, it was actually the parents' decision. So it was well thought out, and it's a pretty decent plan. All of the receiving schools know which students are coming. So there's already mechanisms in place for them to be housed. Second item on the agenda was redistricting plan. As we know, we've had discussions about redistricting for years now. So that is actually coming to fruition. Where they're doing the renovations at the Welch, that won't be happening in this school year, but the plan is for the 23-24 school year for that to be implemented. The superintendent and the school committee identified 10 pockets of neighborhoods where students are already currently being bused. Those would be the students that would be redistricted to make it more equitable throughout the city as far as educational needs go. What that final number looks like, that's still up in the air, but they do have a good idea of what that will entail. The real key will be educating and informing the public of when it's going to happen and what it's going to look like. The other thing through our discussion was making sure that 5th graders in particular and possibly 4th graders still get to stay in their own home school to finish out their elementary school education. Another item on the agenda was was voting regarding the Welch School, and that's just where there's going to be some construction. They had some concerns regarding voting, but I know that that's already through legal. And the last 2 items was the high school. There was just an update on where they are as far as formulating the complete SOI. And the last one was just a brief update on the budget, which I know is still ongoing, but for once they actually have the funds that they're looking for. So that was the report of committee. No motions were taken. I'll yield to my fellow councilors that were there, Councilor Turco or Councilor Welton, if you want to add any.
All right. Thank you.
So that's a report of committee. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Councilor Rossignol. Moving on to the next report of committee is the Committee on Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Ad Hoc Committee on Energy and Efficiency and Renewable Energy met earlier this evening. Present for the committee were Councilors Welton, Daigle, and myself as chair. All other councilors were present. There were 3 items on the agenda. First item was a program called the Property Assessed Clean Energy Program, or PACE. Presenting that for the city was Senior Planner Drew Levin from the Community Development Department. There was also a presentation made by Rob Dolan of Mass Development, and also present for the meeting were Director of Finance, Mr. Gingras, Director of the Head Assessor, Susan, Ms. Antonellis, and the Collector, Director of Collections, Mr. Morphus. Also present from the Peabody Municipal Light Plant was the Assistant Manager, Mr. Howcroft. The PACE program is for energy improvement projects on commercial and industrial buildings or multi-family residential projects, properties, I should say, with 5 or more units. It's a financing mechanism for these energy improvements that can be paid over 20 years. Target project size are $250,000 projects or greater. Amounts are repaid by way of a betterment assessment and a lien on the property, and the city only acts as a agent to collect these payments. Otherwise, it is managed by the third-party lender and Mass Development. In that collection process, property taxes take priority. For Peabody to take advantage of this program, the council needed to opt into the program. With that, there was a motion made by Councilor Welton, and it's a very lengthy motion, Mr. President. All councilors were present at the committee hearing, so with your agreement, and I see that you're nodding to the affirmative, I'm going to waive the reading.
Agreed.
I'm going to waive the reading of the motion and simply state that it is the language attached to the communication from Kurt Bellavance, Community Development Director, dated February 3rd, 2022, and that is the resolution authorizing the City of Peabody to participate in the Massachusetts Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy Program, PACE, Massachusetts. That's version June 26, 2020. And that language is, as indicated, attached to that communication with the following addition. The City Council retains the right to opt out of this program if it's found to not be beneficial to the City of Peabody. That motion passed the committee, Mr. President, 3-0, and I now bring that to the attention of the full council for consideration. So moved.
Thank you, Councilor McGinn. You heard the motion from Councilor McGinn. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Councilors Gould.
Yes.
Rossignol.
Yes.
Manning Martin. Peach.
Yes.
Welton. O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Daigle.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 11-0.
Mr. President, we did take in as a late receipt a presentation from Mr. Dolan, so it moved to receive that presentation. So moved.
You heard the motion from Councilor McGinn. All in favor? Any opposed? Is a vote. Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. Second item on the agenda was becoming a green becoming a designated green community. Presenting that for the city was Brendan Callahan, the Assistant Director of Community Development. Remotely, we had Neil Duffy, who is the Regional Coordinator for the Green Communities Program. He's from the Mass Department of Energy Resources. And also present was Brian Howcroft, the Assistant Manager of the Peabody Municipal Light Plant. Mr. President, we had a presentation from Mr. Duffy, which has been emailed to us, and there was a motion to receive that. So moved.
Heard the motion from Council McGinn. All in favor? Any opposed? To vote. Council McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. So within the presentation from Mr. Duffy, it was indicated that there are 280 designated green communities in the state thus far. Program's been in existence for quite some time, and that includes a number of Peabody's neighboring communities. The primary benefit of becoming a designated green community is eligibility for grant programs for energy efficiency, and the initial designation grant, should Peabody achieve this designation, is estimated to be in the range of $245,000. The qualification criteria to become a designated community are, number one, to provide an as-of-right siting in designated locations for renewable alternative energy generation, research and development, or manufacturing facilities. Number two, to adopt an expedited application and permit process for as-of-right energy facilities. Number three, to establish an energy use baseline and develop a plan to reduce energy by 20% within 5 years. Number four, to purchase only fuel-efficient vehicles. And number five, to set requirements to minimize life cycle energy costs for new construction. One way to meet these requirements is to adopt the stretch energy code. There were a number of questions around these criteria by the various councilors, including what types of projects might initially be identified. Seems to be the initial thinking around that is that it would, there's tremendous opportunity for improvement within the school system, so that may be the first area to target. There were questions around the cost, what entities would conduct the audits, the need for more specific information around the stretch code, and so forth. With that, it was determined that without making a commitment to entering into this program explicitly, that we would request that the city pursue begin the process of pursuing the green community designation. And to that end, there was a motion by Councilor Welton as follows: move to pursue green community designation for the city of Peabody and refer to the Community Development Department to engage with MAPC for consultation and technical assistance, and to request a community development and MAPC report back progress periodically to the Ad Hoc Committee on Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. Mr. President, that motion passed the subcommittee by a vote of 3-0, and I now bring that for consideration of the full council. So moved.
Thank you, Councilor McGinn. You heard the motion from Councilor McGinn. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Councilors Gould.
Yes.
Rossignol.
Yes.
Manning Martin.
Yes.
Peach.
Yes.
Welton.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Daigle.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 11-0.
Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. The third item and last item on the agenda was the Net Zero Climate Action Planning process. Presenting that for the city was Drew Levin, Senior Planner for Community Development Department. And remotely, we had Brooks Winter from the Metropolitan Area Planning Council. Also present was Brian Howcroft, System Manager from the Peabody Municipal Light Plant. There was a presentation that was received, Mr. President, and would move that we receive that to the full council. So moved.
You heard the motion from Councilor McGinn. All in favor? Any opposed? To vote. Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. So in, as an update, this process kicked off with a workshop in December of 2021. There have been outreach meetings with community organizations, the Rotary, Green Peabody, Newhall Fields Community Farm, to name a few. There was a community input survey published, and that survey is ongoing, and in a moment I'll provide the link that community members can utilize to participate in that survey. There was an initial strategy list, which is under development, and there are meetings with other MLPs to share approaches and best practices. There is the 2050 roadmap law requires that Massachusetts reach net zero emissions by 2050, and it requires a 50% reduction by 2030. It requires that municipal light plants purchase 50% of their power from non-carbon sources by 2030 and get to net zero by 2050. And that new stretch energy code, efficiency standards, environmental justice definition, workforce development, and much more are included in this law. The timeline going forward for this process is that as we move further into the spring, they're going to gather additional community input and further develop their initial list of actions and strategies. Into the summer of 2022, they're going to gather some additional feedback and conduct a second community workshop. And then towards the end of the summer 2022, publish a first draft of the roadmap, and by the fall of 2022, finalize that roadmap. The link to the survey that I mentioned earlier is mapc.ma/Peabody. Again, mapc.ma/Peabody. And if you click on that link, that will bring you to the survey to participate in some data gathering that they're doing as part of this process. Mr. President, we've asked Mr. Winter to come back and provide additional input to the committee and updates as they get deeper into the process. They are agreeable to do that, so you should anticipate that we will have a further meeting on this and provide updates as we go forward. And with that, that's a report of progress, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor McGinn. All right. With that being said, we'll now move on to, I'm sorry, Councilor Manny Martin.
Thank you. Just a quick remark, if I may. To Councilor McGinn, I just wanted to commend you. That committee hadn't met in some time, and it hasn't been active, so I really appreciate the time and effort that you have put into this particular meeting, and I'm looking forward to your leadership in the council, being the liaison with the council, with other city departments, with the activities that are going on, so that we can be apprised, and therefore the community can be apprised of all the energy efficiency issues that are going on in the city. So I thank you for that.
Thank you, Councilor Manny Martin. Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Councilor Manny Martin.
All right. Now, moving on to motions, orders, and resolutions. Councilor Gould.
Motions, Mr. President.
And Councilor Rossignol.
No motions this evening. Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilor Manny Martin.
Thank you, Mr. President. Under suspension of the rules, motion to receive item 8E, regarding the enforcement of breakdown lane on 154, 156 Newbury Street, and 8F, regarding signage in that same area. And if I may, through you to Councilor Gamache, have those matters are you satisfied with the resolution of those matters?
Yes, through, Mr. President, through Councilor Manny Martin. Yeah, everything has been, is being completed. There was a couple instances, but the neighbors understand that it's an ongoing process, and therefore they're satisfied as well. And the owner of Auto Factory is lived up to the agreement that he met when he met with us, so I'm happy about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So then, therefore, Councilor Gamache, we can remove that out of subcommittee, those items. Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Allison, if you could remove those. We had left them in committee. Thank you very much. And it was a pleasure working with you to help resolve that, Councilor Gamache. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion to, oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Motion that you
Thank
made.
you.
Yeah, so under suspension of the rules, we'd move to receive item 8E and 8F. All in favor? Any opposed? Vote. Councilor Manning Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very briefly, hopefully briefly, I'd like to just touch upon the issue that's going on at the Salem Country Club that is before the Conservation Commission. And I have been, I've participated in one, and I've watched the other, and I've been following it very closely, their meetings. And in my opinion, what the Salem Country Club is doing by not allowing the Conservation Commission to have a public meeting on their property, I believe that they're intentionally interfering with the Concom's right to deliberate. If the public meeting is closed before the site walk, which is what happened on the original one, they opened it and closed it without any discussion because they can't deliberate due to open meeting law, so they closed it, opened it and closed it in the parking lot. And if the public hearing is closed before the walk, the commission can never deliberate while they are actually observing the very things they are investigating. For them to talk about it after isn't the same thing. None of the members could remember one hole from the other to keep things in context. The commission needs to be able to discuss as they see it for themselves. For the Salem Country Club to insist that it has the right to refuse public access to their property means that the commission can never have a proper deliberation because by definition, it's not a public meeting. So by refusing to permit a public meeting on site, the club procedurally, in my opinion, has handcuffed the commission and neutralized the open meeting law. So there must be something, I believe, in the open meeting law that prohibits anyone from taking any action that would compromise the open meeting law and a municipal entity's right to hold one. That being said, what I'd like to do is make a motion to request the city solicitor to advise on the matter of a public municipal board, specifically the Conservation Commission, holding a public meeting on private property in their effort to do their due diligence in deliberating matters and investigating environmental infractions under their jurisdiction when the property owner and alleged violator, the Salem Country Club, refuses to allow the meeting to take place on their property. How should the commission handle this, and how can they include the public as is their intention? And is this legal behavior by the Salem Country Club, given that the matter is a matter of public interest, to include public funds and environmental impacts to the city? Is there anything in the open meeting law that prohibits anyone from taking any action that would compromise the open meeting law and a municipal entity's ability to hold one? I'd like to make that in the form of a motion, and I'd also like to make it an emergency preamble as the Conservation Commission meets again on April 25th, and I know that this information will be helpful to them in order to do their due diligence, deliberate, and investigate a very serious matter. So on that, I will lead with the emergency preamble. So moved.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Manning Martin. So the first vote will be on an emergency preamble to move forward as an emergency preamble. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Councilors Gould,
Yes.
Rossignol,
Yes.
Manning Martin,
Yes.
Peach,
Yes.
Welton,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
McGinn,
Yes.
Gamache,
Yes.
Turco,
Yes.
Daigle,
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 11-0.
So now we're going to move on to the actual motion itself. Councilor Gamache.
Yes, I'm just throwing it out there that, yes, it's not right for them to not allow the public on their property and allow the board to deliberate under the open meeting law. I agree 100%. But I also believe that a lot of the times an agent from the city, i.e. being Lucia, would be the Conservation Commission agent that primarily investigates violations. She could actually go out there, videotape exactly what's going on to show the committee in a public meeting, in a public forum, that would allow for the public to visually see, and I'm just throwing this out there, so that They've denied access for the public to go out there. They denied the access of the commission to go on the property. Well, not go on the property because they could go on the property, but they couldn't hold a public hearing because the public wasn't allowed. What I'm saying is that I have dealt with Lucia. She's a tiger. She knows her stuff. And if we can't get any resolution with this, I would suggest, and it's only a suggestion, that the Conservation Commission have Lucia go out there with a member of her department, videotape all the areas that are in question. She can itemize it and make her comments on that and present it to the board so that they can at least have a public forum so that the public can now respond to that video. And that might be the only alternative. I'm just throwing it out there, but I have all the faith in the world in the Conservation Commission, and like I say, Lucia's probably one of the best around as far as conservation issues. She knows what she's doing. She'll be able to do it, I believe, and at least get, if something happens before the 25th, have her, because she's an agent, she can go out there, and I'm sure the country club would let her videotape it. So I'm only guessing, but I think that is an alternative in case we can't get this resolved before the 25th. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gamache. Councilor Manny Martin.
Thank you, and I appreciate your suggestion. It's a good one. I, on the other hand, don't have as much faith. You said you were sure that the Salem Country Club would allow her to go out there with a videotape. I don't believe that for a second, having watched the behavior of their attorney. He's been bullying the board members, in my opinion. And I agree with you also. Lucia is a tiger. She's standing tall, she's digging her heels in, and she's not getting pushed around. So again, I'm trying, as you are, to give the Concom the tools that they're able to do their job. And with that, I think that is a great suggestion in addition to what they're trying to do. But I really want a legal opinion as to can they be doing this. But I don't think they'll allow anyone on there with video camera.
Thank you, Councilor Manny Martin. We have a motion on the floor. Councilor Daigle.
Thank you, Mr. President. I agree with Councilor Gamache. I think that would be a good compromise. I think this is an exceptional case where there is a tax abatement for open space, which even furthers the case to allow, the public and a city board or commission to do a site visit on the property. So however that's communicated, I don't know what the legalities are, but I think there's a right for the Conservation Commission to tour the property. My 2 cents. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So just as a summary, that we have a motion on the floor with asking for a legal opinion, which will establish some of that. So any other discussion on this motion? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote.
Councilors Gould.
Yes.
Rossignol.
Yes.
Manny Martin.
Yes.
Peach.
Yes.
Welton.
Yes.
O'Neill.
Yes.
McGinn.
Yes.
Gamache.
Yes.
Turco.
Yes.
Daigle.
Yes.
Melville.
Yes.
Motion carries 11-0.
Councilor Manny Martin, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No further motions.
Thank you, Councilor Manny Martin. Councilor Peach.
Thank you, Mr. President. Under suspension of the rules, move to receive item 8N. This is the site development plan for the hearing we continued earlier tonight.
You have the motion from Councilor Peach. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. We'll receive that and forward that for that special permit hearing.
Thank you.
Councilor Peach.
Thank you, Mr. President. Under suspension of the rules, move to receive item 8M and late communication 17 and refer to the committee on a whole for a charter discussion.
So you're the motion will receive the, under suspension of the rules, move to receive the late communication and item 8M. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Councilor Peach.
No further motions. Thank you.
Councilor Welton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to make a co-motion with Councilor Turco regarding a request to Department of Public Services to install a crosswalk on Linfield Street at Radden Road, adjacent to the park. So moved.
Here's the motion from Councilor Welton. All in favor? Any opposed? To vote. Councilor Welton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd also like to make a request to the Department of Public Services to install a Children at Play sign and also a Not a Throughway sign at the corner of Ralph Road and Linfield Street. So moved.
Hear the motion from Councilor Welton. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Councilor Welton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Another request for Department of Public Services to please remove a sign at 40 Martineck Ave, which says no parking here to corner. Unfortunately, that sign was placed at the wrong side of the street, so we're not going to request for a sign to be put at the other side of the street, but have that sign removed in front of 40 Martineck Ave. So moved.
Hear the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? The vote. Councilor Welton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Another request for Department of Public Services to install a dead-end street sign on the corner of Lynn and Sunset Drive. So moved.
Hear the motion from Councilor Welton. All in favor? Any opposed? The vote. Councilor Welton.
Lastly, not a motion, just want to recognize and wish best of luck to Ward 1 resident Sergeant Jim Harkins, and also he'll be joining Chief Tom Griffin and Mayor Ted Betancourt running the marathon on Monday on behalf of Cops for Kids for Cancer. And secondly, I want to also recognize and wish best of luck to Mike Gould, who's running on behalf of the Michael J. Fox Foundation to cure Parkinson's. That's all.
Thank you, Councilor Welton. Councilor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move on suspension of the rules to receive item 8J and refer to the Committee on Aggregate Industry. So moved.
Hear the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? The vote. Councilor O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. President. No further motions this evening.
Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. On suspension of the rules, move to receive item 7A and refer to finance. So moved.
Heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? The vote. Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. On suspension of the rules, move to receive item 7B and refer to finance. So moved.
Heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? The vote. Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. On suspension of the rules, move to receive item 7C and refer to industrial and community development. So moved.
You heard the motion from Councilor McGinn. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. On suspension of the rules, move to receive item 8I. So moved.
You heard the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. And regarding 8I, that is a information pertaining to the events that will take place on Monday, honoring the fallen soldiers from the South Danvers at the Battle of Lexington. There will be a commemoration at the Lexington Monument on Washington Street, Peabody, on Monday, April 18th at 10 a.m. So, point of information on 8I. I believe there'll also be a small event at the Historical Society properties across the street shortly thereafter. Mr. President, under suspension of the rules, move to receive item 9A and set up a public hearing. So moved.
Hear the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? The vote. Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. No further motions.
Councilor Gamache.
Yes, under suspension of the rules, move to receive item 8H and set up a public hearing for a special permit.
Hear the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? The vote. Councilor Gamache.
Moved under suspension of the rules to receive item 8K for a request for amendment to the zoning ordinance. Send this communication to the planning board, as well as set up a public hearing for the city council and place this in industrial and community development committee.
So we would put it in ICD first and then do the public hearing.
Well, you can schedule the public hearing. The meeting's next at the end of this month.
Councilor Gould.
We could put it on our agenda for the 28th if you want, if there's room. There's a bunch of stuff, but.
So you can advertise now, set the advertisement up.
Actually, there's a bunch of priority items. I'm not sure we have time to get to it because.
We have to talk. There is a lot.
Yeah, Allison and I will see what we can do with that.
We'll send it to the planning board and they'll set up the subcommittee meeting. If that's,
Oh, it's, okay, it's kind of time sensitive, but that's
I agree.
okay.
Yep. We can always have another ICD meeting, right, within next month. We can have 2, it's okay. There's a
Yeah.
lot in there.
Yeah, an off night or something, because again,
I
I'm
would
trying to
totally
get
agree.
that property developed in the best way we can, and this is a good proposal, so thank you.
Through you, Mr. President. We'll see what we can do, Counselor.
Thank you.
So the motion right now is to forward this to ICD and the planning board.
Correct.
All in favor, any opposed to the vote? Counselor Gamache.
I would move to send a communication to public, a motion to have a sidewalk repair at 1 Paul Ave to DPS, so move.
You heard the motion. All in favor, any opposed to the vote? Counselor Gamache.
Also send a motion to Public Services to remove the right on red sign at the westerly side of the high school on Lowell Street, so moved.
You heard the motion. All in favor, any opposed to the vote? Counselor Gamache.
Yes, under suspension of the rules, 9B, Class 2 motor vehicle license, new, Route 1 Auto Sales, 218 Newbury Street, set up a public hearing.
You heard the motion. All in favor, any opposed to the vote? Counselor
Item
Gamache.
8D, entertainment license renewal, Polana Steakhouse, 989 Rear Sylvan Street, Salem Country Club, 133 Forest Street, Toscana Restaurante, 3 Bourbon Street. Move approval, all papers being in order.
You heard the motion from Counselor Gamache. Counselor Manning Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Councilor Gamache, I'd ask that you hold the Salem Country Club's renewal for 2022 until the matter that is before the Conservation Commission is heard, resolved, and heard to their satisfaction.
I have no problem doing it. I don't know if legally we can, where they have not been found guilty of any violations.
Simply holding it in abeyance.
This is for 2022. Is that, would they still be able to have entertainment if without the license?
They've had entertainment this year.
Oh, that's what
thus
I was
far.
going to say, so it doesn't really, technically, it doesn't matter. Okay, there's no problem with that. So strike 133 Forest Street, Salem Country Club, move approval of Polana Steakhouse and Toscana Restaurante, all papers being in order. Yep.
You heard the motion from Counselor Gamache. All in favor, any opposed to the vote? Counselor Gamache.
Yes, the next item, Class 2 motor vehicle, under suspension of rules 9F, Mr. President. Class 2 motor vehicle license renewal for 2022, Tri-State Auto Sales, 248 Newbury Street. Moving approval, all papers being in order.
You heard the motion from Counselor Gamache. All in favor, any opposed to the vote?
Thank you,
Counselor
Mr.
Gamache.
President.
That's it, you also Counselor Gamache? You good? Okay, thank you. Counselor Turco.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not sure if this is a motion, just a brief request of Councilor Manning Martin as Chair of the Public Safety Committee. We had the Linfield Street traffic study from 2020. It's in committee. We briefly discussed some potential traffic concerns of Bartholomew Street and Linfield, and we decided to leave it in committee, but I'd like to bring that back up for discussion, and to my co-counsels, I'm sure the clerk will forward you that study again. I kind of left it by the wayside for 2 years, but if you thoroughly read that traffic study, it basically addresses that every crosswalk on Linfield Street is not ADA compliant. Many of the sidewalks are in disrepair, and also the safety concerns at those, the 3 intersections, starting from the Rotary up to Bartholomew Street. So I'd like to address that, and if you don't mind, Council Manning, if we could ask somebody from the Disabilities Commission. I know Council Gould serves on that commission. I'm not sure if you could act as the liaison for that commission and a counselor, or if you'd like to have somebody else. But
So I'd be glad to, yeah.
Council Manning, and Captain Richards, and also Mr. Labossiere, just to get a status on any of these. And that's a co-motion with Councilor Walton. Oh, it's not a motion. My apologies. It's a request.
Yes, certainly. We'll set something up, and I think it's an excellent idea to invite the Disability Commission as well. Thank you.
Okay. Counselor Welton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Happy to have that be a co-request with you, Councilor Turco. Just wanted to ask, should we have a representative from World Tech available for that as well?
Thank you. And yes, Council Manning, World Tech wrote that traffic study, so if we could have Rich Benevento from World Tech also. Thank you. One more motion, Mr. President. Sidewalk repair at 7 Mansfield Street to DPS.
The motion from Counselor Turco. All in favor? Any opposed to vote? Counselor Turco.
No further motions.
Thank you, Counselor Turco. Counselor Daigle.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to receive and schedule a public hearing for item 8A for Convenient MD LLC at 210 Andover Street, subject to all papers being in order. So moved.
So you had the motion under suspension of the rules, move to receive item 8A and set up a public hearing. All in favor? Any opposed? Is a vote. Councilor Daigle?
Have we covered item 8B to receive? I would like to
B,
make a...
C, and
B, C, and D.
Correct.
Okay, just for the general public, I'd like to make a motion to receive item 8B about freight forward air, and then items C and D, both about, from the Peabody Veterans Council, about the Memorial Day Parade on Monday, May 30th. So moved.
You heard the motion from Councilor Daigle to move to receive and suspension of the rules, item 8B, and forward to that special permit hearing, and then also to receive item C and D. So moved. And all in favor, any opposed? The vote. Councilor Daigle.
Let's jump down to item 8G from Carbon Health, 210 Andover Street, Suite 111, and schedule that for a special permit hearing, subject to all papers being in order.
You heard the motion from Councilor Daigle. All in favor, any opposed? Is a vote. Councilor Daigle.
And let's jump over to
9E.
Thank you. Number 9E, junk dealers license renewals for 2022, subject to all papers being in order. Bill's Salem Music and Fofos, 136 Main, Cash Call, 161 Main Street, Charland Appliance, 15 Spring Street, GameStop, 210 Andover Street, GameStop, 300 Andover Street, Habitat Restore, 58 Rear Pulaski, as well as Long's Jewelers, 35 Cross Street. So moved.
You heard the motion. All in favor, any opposed? The vote. We also have
And
9C.
under suspension of the rules, because I jumped around, I'm going to go back to 9C and make a motion to approve, subject to all papers being in order, the utility contractor's license for W. Harrison and Sons, 12 Harrison Ave in Salisbury, Massachusetts. So moved.
You heard the motion. All in favor, any opposed? It's a vote. Councilor Daigle, anything else?
No further motions unless I missed something.
I think we're good. So just a couple of quick items. First is we have a committee of the whole meeting on Tuesday for the charter. We'll be dealing with Articles 1 and 2 within the charter, and Attorney Barrett will be available. You saw some of the materials that were sent out. The second item, just on 7C, this outdoor dining ordinance amendment from the mayor, just kind of update so everybody understands. On April 1st, the legislature and the governor passed a bill that extended the temporary outdoor dining for another year. So nobody that was operating last year should have any problems getting their outdoor dining permit this year. What we're going to be talking about here, so some people had asked about the timeliness of this particular issue, but there shouldn't be any interruption in any service, as I think we will get this done well within a year. And then lastly, just on discussion of like these renewals, and I'm just speaking as somebody that does licensing and permitting. A license really isn't worth much if you don't have to renew it for 6 months and you operate without it. We've seen a lot of these, and it's kind of something I've seen on the council. So I think it's worthy of a discussion about kind of setting harder deadlines on getting these renewals in. And also, it's just, I'm thinking about the city clerk's operations. When you get a trickle of renewals in, it's harder to keep track who has renewed, who hasn't, because anybody that does licensing will tell you that it's easier to say who hasn't renewed versus who has if you have a hard date deadline. So I think it's worthy of a discussion and something we could, and I think I'd ask, we need some enforcement, as the clerk said, but also I think a lot of it is communication. When you communicate that as it was said before, somebody sends in a renewal in April, but they've been operating January, February, March. If we don't do anything about it, that's just what happens. If that's when it comes in. Councilor Gamache?
Just one question through you to the clerk. Those have dates on it, correct? The expiration dates of those?
They do, yes.
So we should, and again, I applaud your idea, and we should make a hard, fast, boom, that's it.
So Councilor, I was going there, is the liquor alcohol licenses need to be renewed in the month of November. So it's odd that somebody renews their alcohol license but doesn't send in anything for their entertainment license or other permits that they would have, as those are essentially, those are really all your permitting. So there's a way for us, specific to like the restaurants and some of the other types of industries that we license might be a little bit different. But I think it's something worth exploring for the sake of the clerk's office. It's not easy, and I can speak to this when you get this trickle coming in, and it can be confusing. And then you think somebody's licensed and you're not. And there's been instances right now, if you look at Boston, they just had a really serious incident, and there's some permitting, and it falls on the permitting folks on what did they have, what did they not have. So I think it's a discussion to have. I think I'll ask the clerk to give us some feedback, and then maybe we can take it from there. Part of this greater special permit discussion that the mayor is putting together, a discussion on that as well. So that's it for me. If seeing nothing else, Councilor McGinn.
Thank you, Mr. President. You brought up 7C, and you indicated that we're covered under the extension by the governor, which I think is correct to an extent. I believe locally, the last extension we did, which was a motion by Councilor Manning Martin the last time around, we extended our temporary process, which was allowable under the governor's rule as it existed at that time, to December 31st, 2021. So I think we should extend that again, so that we do have exactly the time that you made reference to in your comments, so that nobody's kind of caught in the middle here while we're looking at the longer term solution. So I'd make that motion. Unless you're telling me that the governor's order automatically extends it.
I can explain. So the idea behind it was there was never an intention. The hope was 6 months ago that they would have, there's legislation pending to update certain building codes and whatnot to make it easier for zoning and whatnot at the local level. The idea of this legislation was to retroactively go back and give everybody the 1-year extension. If cities and towns wanted to revoke, it really gives cities and towns the ability to revoke, not necessarily the requirement to renew those temporary outdoor dining. That's the idea behind it. So if a city and town says, we tried it, we don't like it, they can come back and say, we're just not going to do it anymore. But they would have to take an action to do that. The extensions are part of this legislation, giving the cities and towns the ability just to temporarily to continue the extensions as they had been operating. But we can ask the mayor to provide us with, and if they want to update it for another year, we can do that.
Well, why wouldn't we want to extend? I mean, if it's the will of the council, why wouldn't we want to extend it, exercise that ability to extend while we're working out the longer term solution? Because right now I think we're in no man's land.
I don't think so. I think we're good. If we wanted to, we could do that. We don't have the language. I think we can have it at the next meeting and part of the packet to do that, to just ensure that we're doing it correctly. But I think we're fine as far as the outdoor dining. We are well within our. And I thought we did it for 2 years. I thought when we originally did it, we did it for 2 years. Last year, he extended
the last extension, Mr. President, I'm pretty confident. I went back and looked at this because I was concerned about that we might create a void here. It ended December 31st, 2021. So I think if there is, trust me, I will defer to you. I know that you're very involved in this in your day job. So. If you say we're covered, I'll go with that. But
the only reason I say I think why I'm very confident we're covered is because the temporary outdoor dining extension went to April 1st of 2022. So it wouldn't make sense for us to have a temporary, our own thing that would actually come short of that. So the legislation was very clear, and the guidance I've given to municipalities is very clear. If you want to stop it, you can stop it, but there's no action that you need to do to extend it.
Okay,
I'll reach out to the city solicitor's office as well, and just ensure if there's something that he believes we need to do, we can include that in there.
Great, thank you, Mr. President. And then just administratively, when I looked at that 7C, I meant to ask this when I made the motion. If councilors can kind of pull that out so you see what I'm talking about. It's there. there's 2 pages that are kind of the cover letter and the proposed ordinance change, zoning ordinance change. But then the substance of it is the last 2 pages, and it begins with section 6. So I think we might be missing some of the language. I looked in the electronic version too, just to see if maybe it was a photocopy thing or something, and it was the same thing. It started with section 6. So if I could just ask the clerk to recheck that we got all the language. It appears we're missing something here. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilor McGinn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Councilor Gamache. You heard the motion to adjourn. All in favor? Any opposed? A vote? We're adjourned. Thank you.